Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today for this session on protecting and promoting mental health and well-being before, during, and after climate crisis. This is a session organized by the IASC Thematic Group on mental health and psychosocial support, disaster risk reduction, and climate change. And I'm Alessandra Rezu. I'm the Director for Global Inclusive Health, Humanity and Inclusion, one of the members of the Thematic Group. And together with me today, there are different representatives from the Thematic Group, WHO, MHPSS.net, IFRC. In addition, we also have the pleasure to have Afia from Bangladesh, an advocate on climate change and disability inclusion with us today. This will be for us the opportunity to discuss about climate change and mental health and well-being through a video that we will screen today. The aim of this session is really to discuss mental health in climate crisis in an inclusive way as much as possible. But really to do so, also showing the video that is titled Meera and the Disaster Rewind Machine, that will be not only available today here, has been available for the last couple of days here at COP28, but also will be available online from now on for easy access to everybody. So before showing the video and hearing from the colleagues from the other organizations members of the Thematic Group, a few words on why it is important really to discuss about mental health in climate crisis today, specifically on mental health, but broadly about health and climate crisis. First of all, because today and this year, for the first time at COP28, we had leaders from all over the world and global health stakeholders from all over the world acknowledging finally that the climate crisis is a health crisis. And this is as much as obvious this can be for many of us. This is the very first time at COP that this is acknowledged in this way. And we have for the first time a significant number of Ministers of Health at COP28 to promote the importance of health within the climate crisis. And we had many sessions discussing about the link between health and climate change, the importance of developing very resilient health systems, the importance of training health workers on climate change. But of course, for us today, it's very important to say that health goes beyond physical health. We are talking about mental health. We are talking about emotional health. We are talking about well-being. And this is important for many reasons for us. The first is because each one of us is affected both physically and emotionally by climate crisis. And this is really needs to be said again and again, because not enough attention has been brought to the topic of mental health in climate crisis. And we all have the responsibility to raise awareness on this topic. But also, we have the opportunity here today to bring an intersectional approach to mental health and climate crisis through the voice of young people that are part of this panel. But also, we have to remember that the intersectionality means also not only age, but also gender. And so this is an opportunity for us to remind ourselves how people from different genders can experience climate crisis in a different way. And of course, their participation and meaningful participation in actions. There is another aspect of this work that we want to highlight, that is the inclusivity perspective. Of course, climate change affects people of different groups, diverse groups in different ways. And so we have to also remember that not only it's important to address mental health in the case of climate crisis, but also that persons with mental health conditions and psychosocial disabilities are affected by climate crisis. That people with any type of disability, diverse types of disabilities, are affected by climate crisis, and therefore our actions need to be inclusive of everybody, no matter of the age, the gender, the disability, and so on. This is just a little introduction about what you will hear with us today. And I now have the pleasure to give the floor to my colleague from WHO, Ashley, to continue this conversation. Please, thank you, Ashley.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. So you may ask, what is the link between reducing disaster risk, climate adaptation mitigation, and mental health and well-being? We know that individuals and communities, when they experience emergencies such as hazardous events, including disasters, that they can experience a diverse range of reactions. So such as a stress reaction, but then also more significant psychosocial impairment. And fortunately, we know that a majority of people who experience stress reactions, this will resolve quickly, but we know the most important factor is access to social support and re-establishing community networks. And however, these protective factors may be very limited in emergency settings, which of course can lead to new mental health conditions or worsen existing mental health conditions. So we have some statistics here, and of course they're just statistics, but they're important to point out that almost all people in humanitarian emergencies will experience some level of distress. And as I said before, most will improve over time. We know that 1 in 5 people, which is 22% of people in humanitarian emergencies, will experience a mental disorder. And that people with severe mental disorders are especially vulnerable during humanitarian crises. And these statistics really speak to the importance of there being a clear need and link between disaster risk reduction efforts and mental health to ensure that we can improve psychosocial outcomes in every phase of the emergency. And we also know that when we integrate disaster risk reduction and mental health and well-being considerations, it really leads to more resilient societies, communities that are able to focus on prevention efforts, response efforts, and also recovery efforts, which you're going to hear more about in our video today. And just this last statistic that I think is really important for us here today at COP28 is that the cost of mental health conditions resulting from climate-related hazards is expected to be nearly $47 billion per year by 2030. So we can see that this statistic means that financially the cost of inaction is quite large. And I'm very excited to pass it over to my dear colleague Maya to tell you more about some of the work that we've been doing to address these concerns.
Thank you, Ashley. So the importance of supporting the mental health and psychosocial well-being of people that are affected by emergencies has been recognized for many, many years. And so in 2007, the IASC Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Reference Group has been established. This is an interagency group that is currently consisting of over 65 member agencies, international NGOs, UN organizations, international agencies, and academia that are all promoting best practices in mental health and psychosocial support in emergencies. It is currently co-chaired by the World Health Organization and by IASC MHPSS Center. And so this group of agencies support the interagency coordination and activities for mental health and psychosocial support at the global level, both in acute and also protected humanitarian crisis and public health emergencies. And so this group works at the global level, but also at the national level. There are multiple interagency groups that are supporting the coordination in emergency settings. So currently there are 59 functional mental health and psychosocial support, so-called technical working groups. So these groups are consisting of all kinds of agencies that are supporting the mental health and psychosocial well-being of people that are affected by these emergencies. And so the reference group at the global level does many different activities, but I would like to highlight the search support that the reference group is supporting. So there is a mental health and psychosocial support mechanism that facilitates a rapid deployment of specialists whenever needed. So for example, last year when the climate change caused massive rainfalls, there were floodings in Pakistan, which caused loss of livelihoods and also a lot of damage and destruction, heavily impacting the psychosocial well-being of people in Pakistan. And so then a person was deployed rapidly to support the agencies that are already working in Pakistan, to support with the interagency need assessment, with a multi-agency strategy and plan, and so on, to support the flood response. And so the reference group also develops guidance and tools at the global level. So for example, during COVID-19, there were multiple publications and resources, for example, for children, to a storybook to see or to help them cope with the consequences of COVID-19. This was a storybook that was translated in over 147 languages and has been disseminated very, very widely. There was a tool for older adults, a tool for basic psychosocial skills support for first responders, and so on. And so this group of agencies at the global level also identified the need to scale up capacities for preparedness, including for climate change preparedness, basically. And this is also what Alessandra mentioned, this group of agencies that have now produced the video that we will be seeing in a minute. I will be handing over to you, Amanda, to introduce us a little bit more to the work of the group and the video.
Yeah, so may I have the next slide?
Yes.
Thanks. So, so can you hear me? Great. So the disaster risk reduction and climate crisis working group, the IASC Reference Group, it's a technical group. We produced a big technical note, which actually was early on in the slideshow, and then the ready package is coming out. And this typically is oriented towards helping bridge or make linkages between the MHPSS field and the fields of disaster risk reduction and climate crisis response. And we realized that we didn't really have something that articulated these issues in a more accessible way, that wasn't so technical, that could be used sometimes with our humanitarian colleagues, but also sometimes with communities to make people really connect to the issues of why disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation, integration of psychosocial support and mental health considerations was so important and so relevant to all our lives. So we came up with the idea of creating a video that could be used at the start of workshops as a basis for workshops, or just shared with people to get conversations going. On the one hand, we wanted to illustrate some of the ideas that we want to promote, but really also create a platform through which we can open conversations and get processes going, and some of the more technical work can sort of follow and build on that. So we're really pleased to be able to share with you this video. We'll watch it for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have a chance to kind of reflect on how the video seeks to do the things we hope it will, and also how we can use it in our various contexts to advance the conversations and action around linking MHPSS with DRR and climate crisis response.
Meera lived on the banks of a great river. Her father built boats for the fishermen, and her mother cared for Meera, her two young brothers, and their elderly grandmother who had dementia and needed special attention. Meera was a bright and helpful girl who dreamed of growing up to be a teacher. The people who lived on the banks knew how to deal with the yearly floods that had come for as long as anyone could remember. They were also used to the storms that came up the river from the sea. But with changes in the climate, storms were becoming less predictable and much stronger than before. Meera's grandmother said that the weather patterns were now so different from what she could remember when she was younger. This year's storm was more powerful than anything they had ever seen. The weather system caused the sea level to rise and sent a powerful wave surging up the river towards Meera's home. No one was expecting this. And when the wave hit the houses, there was chaos and destruction. Some wooden houses were smashed by the wave, and others were torn from their moorings and carried by the water. Meera's home was washed up onto the higher ground and crashed onto its side. The disaster brought tragedy for many families, including Meera's. Her elderly grandmother was killed when the house toppled over, and her father's spine was seriously damaged, paralyzing him from the waist down. The family had to move to a temporary camp many miles away. Life changed for Meera after the disaster. Her mother went to work in a house in another town to earn for the family, since Meera's father could no longer work. Her father put a brave face on his disability, but Meera saw him grow more and more depressed because he could not move around. The whole family missed her grandmother. With her mother working and no one else to help the family, Meera dropped out of school to care for her father and her brothers. She lost contact with her friends who had been displaced to a different camp, and it seemed like now she would never get to become a teacher. People in the camps were often frustrated and angry because their lives were hard, and Meera didn't feel safe moving around by herself. Every day before she slept, Meera prayed that the suffering that her family and others like them faced would be relieved, and that they could have a happy life again. One night, in her dreams, she saw a strange machine. It was a disaster rewind machine that could turn back time. It had 4 settings, and Meera turned the dial to the first, preparedness. Suddenly, Meera was transported back to a time just before the storm. She could see that there were volunteers being prepared to respond to hazards and support people who were affected in their aftermath. She saw government officials and community groups discussing plans for temporary housing and assistance. A psychologist was explaining how important it was to provide social and emotional support to people who were affected by a crisis. She also explained that this would help them cope with a disaster and reduce the chances of longer-term problems. Then, Meera saw the storm surge strike again, causing terrible destruction once more. However, this time, the community volunteers were quick to come to the assistance of the affected people. They comforted Meera's family as they mourned her grandmother and provided practical support to her father in overcoming barriers to access the services he needed. The temporary shelters were organized to keep neighbors and relatives close together. So, when Meera's mother had to work to feed the family, someone they knew helped to look after Meera's father and brothers while she went to school. At school, the teachers were especially kind to the children who had lost family and encouraged the students to help one another with practical things like homework assignments and sharing school supplies. There was one girl in Meera's class who found it hard to concentrate and frequently cried in school, So her teacher arranged for her to see a counselor who had been trained to help children who were struggling after the disaster. Meera's father also got support from a community group and received training to take up a new job at a shop. He became more confident about living with his disability. Slowly, Meera's family put their life together again. Meera looked at the disaster rewind machine and turned the dial back to mitigation and prevention. Once again, she was transported back to the period before the terrible storm. This time, she saw people, including her father, shifting all the wooden houses towards the edge of the floodplain. She saw her father explaining to the children that all the adults had discussed and agreed to do this to protect the houses from high flooding, and that the stronger, higher houses would keep them safe and reduce the risks of damage to their homes. Other people were making plans to be able to move their livestock to higher ground. The government was also announcing a new early warning system by radio and SMS message to alert people of hazards like strong storms or flooding. Meera's family also received a visit from a community health worker from her grandmother's clinic to make sure they were prepared to evacuate her if necessary. This time, when the storm surge came, Meera saw that the houses stood strong above the waves. The children and adults inside had already been warned of the danger by the government and had moved their livestock and boats to higher ground. They were all confident about the measures they had taken to protect themselves and were less afraid. When the storm cleared, there was only minor damage to the houses, and no one had been seriously injured. Even though she was dreaming, Meera cried with joy to see that her grandmother was alive and her father was walking about. Everyone in the community helped to clean up after the storm, their bonds even stronger for having worked together to prevent harm. Meera didn't want to leave this happy part of her dream, but she knew she had to turn the dial to explore the final setting: response and recovery. This brought her back to reality, where her family was suffering after the disaster. However, this time she saw people talking about how they needed to rebuild their community so that the disaster would never happen again. There were organizations helping people like her father speak about their experiences and suggest ways to rebuild the houses more safely. There was a scheme to help families like hers to start small businesses, so her mother was able to move back to work from home. The government increased the number of social workers to help children stay in school, and disaster preparedness and prevention was introduced as a topic in their curriculum, so that everyone grew up with knowledge of how to prepare for and protect themselves from hazards. This made people more confident about facing these and better able to cope with the stress of an emergency. When Meera woke up from her dream, she thought long and hard. She knew what she wanted to do. Everything the disaster rewind machine had shown her was about how people can take action to reduce or prevent the harm and pain of disasters. This was so important, but Meera wondered why people didn't do anything to stop or reduce hazards like these destructive storms in the first place. Her grandmother had said that the changes in the climate were caused by people's effects on nature, but that they didn't care enough to stop this. Meera made up her mind that she would do whatever she could to prevent more disasters like the storm that harmed her family. She now had a new goal in life. Like Meera, around the world, many people are working to address the causes and drivers of the different kinds of crises that occur where they live. Like them, we each have a role to play in preventing, preparing for, and responding to disasters to reduce the suffering of families and communities and protect their well-being.
As you have just seen in that video, it seeks to try and introduce a number of ideas that we can maybe pull out and discuss. There's quite a lot in that little 10-minute video. So in the first part, we sort of learn about some of the vulnerabilities and the hazards that exist in Meera's community, and then we see the kinds of impacts that can be caused by disaster, sort of using sort of grief and loss, changes and impacts of livelihoods being curtailed or changed, and also the effects of increased stress. And down there, you see the conflict in the displaced communities, displaced camps, and also the longer term implications of the loss of education. And these are ways of sort of perhaps linking back to some of the things that Ashley was mentioning about the kinds of broad sets of impacts and vulnerabilities that are associated with climate-related hazards. And this gives us, we hope that the story of Meera provides us with a way of connecting. We all see the film and we connect to Meera's story, but then it's an opportunity for us to talk about our own context, the communities we come from or that we work in, and the kinds of hazards and kinds of impacts that those communities have experienced, and that they're exposed to. Next, please. And then we have the preparedness section, in which we sort of learn about the kinds of actions that can be taken to prepare for hazards, and to support mental health and psychosocial responses. And in particular, I think for highlighting the role of psychological first aid training as a way to kind of build the capacity of volunteers to support people in the aftermath of disaster and loss. And you also see the fact that peers can play a role, non-professionals can play a role, and of course also trained support providers. Next, please. And then in the third section, we see how sort of mental health and psychosocial support considerations can be integrated into mitigation and adaptation efforts. And we see that, the very fact of actually reducing or preventing hazard impacts can actually result in, the protection of people's mental health. So, when they don't have the experience of harm or a serious harm, their mental health and well-being remains intact, and that prevention is better than cure in this case, right? But we also see how some of the processes to do this, like for example, explaining to children why we're making the change, and now that we're safer because we've come together to make this change, also helps to build a sense of confidence, reduce fears, build relationships in communities, all things that bolster collective and individual well-being, and can sort of strengthen both emotional and social factors. And lastly, we see how post disaster recovery processes can be really transformative, and in ways that really enhance the well-being of individuals and groups, no matter what they've experienced. And we can see that this can be done through inclusion work, through transformation of livelihoods, through education, and also very importantly, I think particularly where we are today, through engagement in climate activism around climate crisis and change. And we've been working on this, as I said, a video guide that is based around this, a workshop guide that's based around this video, which we hope can help people scaffold, use this video as an entry point for talking about people's own contexts and so on. And just a little note to say that this video actually, the origins of Meera's story actually comes from quite some time ago, 2014, after Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. We were working there with a lot of young people, and in the Philippines is, there's a very strong awareness of the impacts of climate change and the vulnerabilities it produces. But so Meera's story actually starts off as the story of Carmencita, who was a young Filipino girl who experienced these things. And into that story come the elements from the real lives of many people that colleagues have been working with. But I'd like to now stop speaking, and we're fortunate to have Yang, our colleague from the volunteer with the IFRC. And Yang, I'd like you to, maybe connect some of the work that you and colleagues have been doing with around climate crisis and also mental health issues with young people to say how does that relate to the story?
Surely. Thanks for giving me this floor. Good morning, everyone. I'm Yang Liu from China, the youth delegate from its International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent, FRC. First of all, I need to express my gratitude for sharing with us the story of Meera and bringing attention to how we can protect young people and vulnerable groups from the climate crisis. Meera's story is like many young people in Asia Pacific facing the tough situations and disasters. And to better understand and support our youth, we have initiated a youth mental health survey this year. And you can find that the survey results show that 80% of our participants think mental health shouldn't be a secret. But only 45% of our participants talk about their mental health issues. So we can find that young people, they really want support, but they feel ashamed to speak out and to search out with the resources they can get. So under this condition, we really hope we can provide a safe environment for youth to recognize their emotions and to seek mental support. That's also what our FRC has been doing in our youth work. Next slide, please. And during our FRC Asia Pacific Youth Network meeting in Vietnam, a session was conducted by the FRC Asia Pacific Mental Health and mental health and social and psychosocial support collaborative to build the connection between climate and youth mental health. In this session, you can find that young people actively share their feelings and concerns about the future through the drawing and expressing their emotions such as fear, worry, disappointment, helplessness. However, they also showed their hope and a desire for positive change and emphasize their potential to contribute to preserving our planet. So I feel honored that our FRC highlights the importance of empowering young people to channel our diverse emotions to the positive climate actions. We, the young generation, have the ability to initiate discussions, raise awareness among the leaders about the significance of climate justice, and also to make changes with themselves by engaging in small acts of the environmental care. Just like Meera's story, showcased how young people can participate and contribute to the preparedness, response, and the recovery activities. Our FRC has recognized the importance of youth mental health as a key agenda item alongside our climate programs, such as through the youth development programs of the Red Cross and Red Crescent. Many young individuals engage in community of awareness campaigns on disaster preparedness, providing the first aid and the psychosocial support, and actively participate in various preparedness, response, and recovery activities. And take the Asia Pacific region as an example, we have established a mental health working group comprising young leaders from different countries, and to inspire and conduct awareness-raising initiatives and promote the importance of psychosocial well-being among our young people. Furthermore, we have conducted online training on psychological first aid for our young peers, recognizing that young people and adolescents prefer to receive peer support, and we believe it is essential to train youth as our peer supporters who can provide vulnerable assistance. So FRC is really doing a lot of work with our youth and widely involved youth in mental health and climate work. By empowering and supporting our young individuals, we can foster a generation that is resilient, empathy, and actively engaged in creating a sustainable and mentally healthy future. So this way we can help more people like Meera and make sure they are better off. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yang. I think can you hear me with my mic? Perfect, thanks a lot. And thanks, Yang, for your contribution. And you have shared a lot about the work of IFRC. Maybe also before giving the floor to Afia, who is from Bangladesh, who is here with us, I want to say a couple of extra words on the video to highlight the important perspective on inclusion that we want to bring to you. You have noticed that the video has subtitles, captioning, and international sign language on the side. This is essential, one of the basic but essential tools that we all have to apply to make sure that these kind of messages can be accessible by everybody. And it is important for us to highlight this. In the video also, of course, inclusion is an important aspect because Meera's grandmother is a woman with dementia. And we always wonder, would with a better preparation and preparedness, would Meera's grandmother would have survived to the climate crisis? And when Meera's dad is injured through the climate crisis, that injuries could be prevented with better preparedness, better preparation. However, no matter or not, all persons with disabilities who are part of and experience a climate crisis has the right to really be included, meaningfully participate, and of course, access to all the services that are available. And I would like now to pass the floor to Afia. And Afia, first, please introduce yourself and please share with us your experience and input when it comes to mental health and climate crisis. But also, how do you think this video and this conversation could be helpful in your work as advocates for disability inclusion in climate change? Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Afia. I'm from Bangladesh and a student of North University. I have law background and I'm a disability rights activist, the climate activist, and I've recently joined Disability Inclusion Executive Inquiry Foundation. So first, I would like to talk about my inputs. Can we translate this video in as language as possible? In many languages like Bangla, Hindi, so that it can reach to more people. Second of all, we need to show one neurodevelopmental disability because general disability and neurodevelopmental disability are two different things. For example, I'm cerebral palsy. I have problem to move. I cannot talk properly. I have other issues. Can we show some accessible place like the shelter should be accessible? Can we put some message by our voice? We need accessible shelter. We need accessible washroom. We need a trained community to guide us, help us, because this is a cross-cutting issue. Person with disability face tremendous problem. Everybody look at their mental health, but not physical health. Can we add with our voice? We have to care about our physical health by our voice. because my problem, I can speak with my voice. It will be more relevant than all of us, all of you, because people will listen. I can explain my problem better than you, and specifically your voice more important. I would like to go to my work area in coastal area. I have to give the message to parents, be aware and be helpful. When we should give the message to them. Mental health is not really a stigma. We should bust out. Can we give a message like this on this video? Mental health is not a stigma or not anything. It's just part of our life by our voice. And I really thank who made this video. They almost include every detail and they took inclusion in mind. In my part, I will use this video and this video will be helpful for me to work. If I show in the beginning of my session, then if I search, it will create a huge opportunity to participate. From my part, I can give. There might be some rhetorical question with our voice, how we feel, how we do, and then we can provide our answers like a cartoon and game and say how we feel in climate, how we suffer. Then please think or please close your eyes so that it will better connect to the audience. And I would like to make one group who will work giving us mental support and rescue us. Can we give a message? We need mental support and proper rescue support during climate hazard because people don't think about us. They only think about themselves. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Afia. Really, on the behalf of the entire panel, we want to thank you for your contribution. I would like to attract the attention of the public on a couple of points that you made very clear. The first one is that mental health is something we all live with. Every day we have to take care of our mental health, but mental health conditions and psychosocial disabilities are out there. And we all need to be aware, but also we need support, and all in an inclusive way. And we are very happy for you to use this video to continue to call for the importance of mental health in climate crisis. So please, you and everybody in the audience, the video is available to everybody, and we really invite you to let us know when you do use it and how we can support to continue spreading this message. We have also heard Afia talking about the importance of raising the awareness of parents, of young people, who often are ashamed of having children who may have any mental health condition or emotional difficulties. And this is also important because we are all part of a community that need to be aware, but also support its members. And last but not least, the most important piece, and thank you, Afia, for making that very clear. Persons with disabilities, young persons with disabilities need to have their voice heard. And so nobody should speak on the behalf of young persons with disabilities, but you should speak on the behalf of yourself. And you can speak. There are other colleagues who are not here or who are not do not have access to this kind of context, and so it is important to remember that we can make.
To this video.
can we add our voice to this video? We can do, it's in our hands what we want to do with this video. We will welcome your input from now on. And if other advocates that would like to bring more inputs to this video, we want to hear from you and we can discuss together how we can make this video stronger, better, or even continue creating different videos of this type to make sure that this message keeps going around and being heard by everybody. So really, we are a powerhouse because we have a message that we want to spread. And so together we can really make a difference. The different organizations that represent the thematic group of IASC, but of course, all the members that are not represented here today, but that have been working behind the scenes and couldn't come to Dubai for this session. And all the young people and the delegation of young people with disabilities and persons with disabilities who were here at the COP throughout the 2 weeks, I'm sure that they would be happy to really also share their comments. Afia has been here from day one of the COP28, and we also thank you for being here until the last day to make sure you can contribute. Shall we open the floor for questions and comments before we close this session?
If I could just add one
Please.
thing, just to say that, you know, Sandra and I were actually, and the rest of us were talking yesterday about the fact that this is just the start of these conversations. So Afia, what you said about becoming a part of the process and whether it's this video is really, it's not complete, it's an opening. It's not meant to represent all something that we take as, you know, it's to start the conversations. And I think you're right that we can translate, we can add other dimensions to the narrative, to this one. But as Alessandra said, we can also build on it because these are important but also deep issues that sometimes need their own video. And then, but we can maybe, you know, Meera's world can be something that we build towards. So yeah, I think we would welcome everyone's participation in this, and particularly advocates like yourselves.
And we want climate justice. We should give this message.
Yes.
Lastly.
Yeah, and we hope that in a way that last scene with Meera talking about her desire to change and is a way in which we also try to acknowledge that, but also the importance of that kind of activism actually for a lot of young people who feel very angry and uncertain about the future, and the role that being active provides, as I'm sure you know. Just wondering, maybe, as you said, Alessandra, that we open it up to the if there's anyone who'd like to, comment or.
Did you want to go? Hi, my name's Emma Lawrence. I'm from the Climate Care Centre at Imperial. I work in climate and mental health. I just want to say a huge congratulations, first of all, for this work and this video. I think it's really powerful. It really summarizes so many important points in a really engaging way. I felt like it really passed very fast watching it. So thank you for that. And as you said, I'm sure it's the start of more to come. I was curious to pick up on a few points raised, particularly by Afia around like stigma and the difficulties also you raised for young people to actually have open conversations with others around their mental health. And I was just wondering if there was comments from the panelists of whether you think there are key narratives or stories that we could tell that would tackle some of those barriers, and whether we often think in kind of Western models of mental health, very individualized mental health, and obviously there's different understandings of mental health around the world and different ways of healing and caring for people with mental health challenges. And I guess one thing in the context of the climate crisis that hearing a lot is that now these are kind of collective traumas rather than kind of individual, and that sometimes some of my colleagues that sort of frontline mental health support in the Global South will say that actually it can be a way in to having conversations with communities about mental health in general in the aftermath of disasters, because you know everyone has experienced this and sometimes it's easier to have those conversations. But yeah, I was just curious of your reflections on what narratives you find helpful working with communities. Are there particular messages that we could get across in videos like this that might start to address some of those barriers for stigma and taking into account the different ways people understand mental health?
We can take this chance to share, and thanks for your insightful sharing. I'd like to share you with our youth initiative called Well-Adopt Toolkit. It is a youth designed program, and it is widely used in our humanitarian network, and also it is conducted by our FRC Climate Center. So this Well-Adopt Toolkit, it contains various like interactive games, and also like the peer education program, so that our youth can become the peer educators themselves, and to lead this event to our to reach our other youth and more people. And it is kind of informal session, so that people are more easily to get to know what this is what we need for our mental health support, that we need to put our attention to our mental health care, and that we can seek help. So that's what we do. We are doing for within our youth network. Thank you.
So just to respond to that, I think, it is an opportunity. I think in the field of kind of humanitarian response, we often, there are many factors that impact on people's mental health. And when we have a mass event that everyone's affected by, it's easy to then talk about it. It's also external, it's visible, it's something that we know that this happened, and after that, this is what's happened to our lives. This is what's happened to our relationships. This is what's happened to how we're feeling. But I think it's, and it in a way offers an opportunity to talk about things in a way that's where the stigma is not internal, but it's, a recognition that it's produced by a multiplicity of factors, right? And I think we always struggle a little bit, to be honest, about, how much we want to adopt a language purely of mental health, which tends to be a little bit more, people think of it in terms of disorders, in terms of medicalization of experiences and suffering. And rather, like, for example, in this video, I think we try to talk about things in very everyday language. There's no technical language. Maybe we mentioned the word dementia, to also acknowledge that there are conditions that are perhaps that might benefit from and are connected to an expert or medical responses. But on the whole, trying to normalize some of these conversations to make the connections between the everyday, the extraordinary, and how we react and respond. So I think, I'm not sure I have an answer, but I think this is one of the things that we have to keep navigating. I see a lot of sometimes advocacy around raising issues of mental health and talking about mental health in a more frank and without stigma. You're trying to destigmatize it by talking about it, which is wonderful. But then we also have communities that think of their suffering, which has a psychological component, but they also think of it in social terms. And we also have to be careful that we don't impose on them a kind of, well, let's say a biomedical or a Western cultural framing of what suffering, where suffering is located, and what we think of it. So I think it's always a bit of a tension, and something we just keep having to try and think about and be careful with, and think about what is most helpful to people, and what might the implications of choosing one approach be versus another.
And maybe just to conclude from my side before passing the mic to Ashley, one of the things that will be important and was inspired by this conversation is that the video and what we say needs to be contextualized according to the culture where we are going to discuss about the topic. So this video tries to reach a large number of people, but is the next question to be discussed is, how should we adapt it to make sure that we go towards what you are saying, reach the different communities that have a different approach to mental health, but also to climate change in a way that they feel represented and therefore can make more steps towards really promoting the message according to their own vision and words. So thank you for that comment. And Ashley, please.
Yeah, just really quickly, and thank you for your question. I think Yang really highlighted this well, that there is such a power right now in youth and young people, and really being able for them to create spaces to talk about their mental health and well-being, which I don't think was done a generation ago. And through these spaces and being able to connect with one another and really think about the future that they want, how they support one another, peer support is just really incredible because they get the language and the understanding of what it means for me to have mental health and well-being and what it means for my community to have mental health and well-being. And I think it's even outside of these peer-to-peer supports, as we saw in the video, having these conversations in schools. Schools are no longer just places for academics. Therefore, let's talk about our social emotional well-being. So create a language and a literacy around it, which is incredibly important.
I think we're actually out of time, we're out of time. So, and I think someone else needs to use the room. So just to say thank you so much for coming, and it's been wonderful to have you here. And you can take the QR code and do please share this. There is a small survey, a feedback survey embedded in the YouTube description that you can take to give some feedback if you want. And if you want to contact the IASC reference groups, working group on DRR and climate crisis, please write to our colleague Brandon Gray, whose email is down at the bottom. He's one of the co-chairs of that group. And we'll be outside if you want to chat with us.
Thank you to the Humanitarian Hub and the Women's Parliament for hosting us.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.